Good to see everyone. Tonight it's time to begin our Bible study period here. We're in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, and we're right around somewhere between verse 26 and 30 there, but we'll start right around there. We'll turn to Mark chapter 4, and we'll start looking at those verses and hopefully get through the end of the chapter here this evening, and maybe into part of chapter 5. We're going to go to God in prayer here in just a moment. I don't know of any announcements of note. I know that Gene had surgery on his hand, if you haven't seen, so glad that he came through that and everything. But at the end of services, we'll be able to services tonight. We'll have an opportunity to make any announcements that I may have missed. At this time, we'll ask Gene to lead us in prayer before we go into our Bible study.
Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this another opportunity that we come out and study your word. And we are thankful, Heavenly Father, that we have that word that this life is over very fast. And to live our lives so that we can be pleasing with you and Jesus. Thankful, Heavenly Father, that many blessings to give us. And pray for those that are number that cannot be out tonight. And have the help that they need to pray for them and to move them. And so, Heavenly Father, we pray that you will always see the people that you follow through with. We want you out so that we can have good influence on others and come in contact with them from day to day. And so, Heavenly Father, we will experience that in each one of them. And then we remember the set things that you do and do something that we do in Christ.
Amen. All right, Mark chapter 4, and we'll start right around verse 3. I'll back up a few verses there, not too much. But what are some of the things that we've studied so far in chapter 4? We started out with a parable, fairly famous parable, I guess, if you go famous, but as far as parables that Jesus told. But what are some of the things that we've covered so far? Yeah, in chapter 4, I'm sorry. Yeah, parable of the sower, our parable, and that had to do with what? That had to do with what? Sowing the seed, right? The seed being, on the different types of ground. The seed representing the gospel, and then the 4 types of soil representing the people that receive that. So we covered that. And then what else was covered? Just in general, we talked a little bit last week about something else, about a few other things. But do you remember a couple of other things we talked about? So we covered the parable of the sower, the parable of the soils. We talked in verse 21 and right around through there. Do you remember what we spoke about there? We talked about letting your light shine, right? I'm not sure if I asked this or not, but what are some ways that we can we can let our light shine, and what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of letting our light shine? To be examples to others, right? So that who can be glorified? Us? No, right? The purpose of letting our light shine before men is so that they'll glorify God, right? That's what it says. What it says in Matthew. All right. The purpose of letting our light shine is not so they'll look at us or look at me and say, man, what a great person that is. The purpose is so they'll look and say, there's something, something different, the way that those people act, the way they talk, the way that they deal with things, and the way that they conduct themselves, just in general. And then that gives us a chance to certainly glorify God and take the gospel to those who need it. Just in general, no really right or wrong answer, but what do you think of some ways that we can let our light shine? This would just be practical examples. Just in everyday life, what do you think? Way to present ourselves, right? Kind of, it kind of covers it. it should be that the way that we conduct ourselves, that that we don't have to tell people, let me see if I can put this the right way. We shouldn't have to broadcast that we're Christians to others as far as with our, by telling someone that we are. Let me explain what I mean. Whenever I meet someone, I shouldn't have to say, you know what, I'm Christian. I shouldn't have to remind everyone, hey, I'm Christian. So yeah. Right. And that, and that's a good way, because people should be able to see, like Tina was mentioning, by the way that we conduct ourselves, that we are. I'd heard this, had a friend of mine tell me this story. He was a preacher in Nashville at the time, but he and another person, they were both members of the church, and they were taking a class at the local college there, and the girl that was in the class with him, they were broken up into groups, and just obviously him and her were Christians, members of the church, and the other people in the group in the class, weren't. But he was saying that how striking it was that he was trying to be a good influence on the group and things like that, and obviously in the group, but some of the people in the group didn't have weren't very spiritually minded, but when they would just talk about various things that weren't necessarily simple in themselves, the girl felt it necessary to let the rest of the group know that she was Christian, and that she didn't participate in those things, and she didn't appreciate them talking about it. Now, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. The way that I look at that is that our goal is to what? Our goal is to take the gospel to those who need it. Our goal is not to turn people off the gospel by coming across as condescending or better or accusatory, and understand that there's things that we have to do. But whenever someone mentions that they did something on if you're talking to someone at work and they say, well, Sunday morning I I went to play golf, and you say, hey, I'm a Christian, I'll do those things in this services. That comes across really bad. All right, there shouldn't be a reason that we have to remind people to do that. Now, in the course of talking to people and things like that, they should know that on Sundays or Wednesdays or whatever it is, that me and my family or me, we're going to be worshiping God, and not that we come across that we have to remind them of doing that. It just comes out. So, yes, yeah. Right. Yeah.
I didn't say I'm a Christian, don't do that. I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
As long as there's anything wrong with pointing that out, if you say, I'm a Christian and I do that around me, it's not necessarily not making your life shine the wrong way.
Right.
We don't have to sit there and take it just because we can do it.
Yeah, and let me clarify, because I have a bunch of thoughts that sound good in my head, and when I say them, they come out not so well. But certainly, if we're in situations like that, like you're talking about, I don't think there's any problem at all saying, at least saying something about it. Just in general, I think we should do it. Also think that we keep wisdom as well. But something very similar happened with my wife and daughter when they were in the store, and the same thing with foul language among employees and everything, and nothing wrong with saying something. In the situation I was using, it was a little more. The example that he told me was a little more, just there's something to the effect of, there's something to the effect of on Wednesday night. When the man mentioned he was going to go home and watch the ball game, and the girl spoke up and said, we don't do that. We don't sin like that. We're Christians, and kind of come across like that. But all that to say, long-winded way, we need to let our light shine through our example. You know, what's the old saying? Right. Right. Well, you know, taxes sometimes in the eye of the beholder, but at the same time, you're right. You know, it says that our speech is supposed to be seasoned with salt. You know, you think about it. You think about the example there. A plate of food that doesn't have any salt is bland, has no taste, and it has too much salt, it completely ruins it. Right, just the right amount. You know, that's where I guess my thought is we just pray for wisdom to say the right thing. Because some people that might get offended say, well, you know, you didn't have any tact, but you know that might be because they were offended and didn't want to hear. Right. So, but you know, from our example, people should see our light shining. What's that old saying? You know, I'd rather see a sermon than I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. You know, meaning, you know, kind of along the lines of, you know, people that, you know, say, well, you know, a father telling a child, you should, you know, do as I say, not as I do, you know, type of thing. So anyway, letting our light shine before men. Mark chapter 4 is where we are getting around to, up to the verses that we finally get up to there. And so we get up to the verse 26, and then we have again another parable of a seed, and I think we ended right around here last time. We kind of flew through here, but we'll cover through that. We'll start in verse 26. It said, "And he was saying, the kingdom of God is like a man who casts seed upon the soil, and he goes to bed at night and gets up by day, and the seed sprouts and grows. How he himself does not know. The soil produces crops by itself. First the blade, then the head, then the mature grain in the head. But when the crop permits, he immediately puts in the sickle because the harvest has come." I think we had kind of blew through this last time. There were just a few minutes left. But what Jesus mentioned back in the beginning of the chapter on the parable of the soil is that it was imperative that they understand that. And why was that? Do you remember why? Because I was looking to see where the verse was. Verse 13, he says, talking about the parable of the sower and the soil, and he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? How will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word." So, in that instance, the very first parable, it talks about the sower sowing the word, taking the gospel to those who need it. There's going to be different kinds of people who receive it, those in different stages and everything. So here, the parable of the seed. So it's talking about this again, about taking the gospel to those who need it. But what's it referencing here? It says, verse 27, he goes to bed at night, he gets up by day, and the seed sprouts and grows. How he himself does not know. What do you think that refers to? Because remember, we're talking about the illustration of the gospel being the seed here and it growing, but said here how he himself does not know. How does he grow he himself doesn't know? What do you think that's referring to? Yes. Yeah. Right. And we have no idea how it's going to be received by different people. We think we talked before there that we're not to be soil testers. It's not our job to pick out who we think is a good candidate for the gospel. Who is a good candidate for us to teach or invite for Bible study or invite to services or whatever. That's not our job. Our responsibility is to take the word to everyone who needs it, and then we'll let what happens happen. And as Nikki points out, sometimes it will be in the most unlikely manner. It may not make any sense, but that's not up to us to decide. Whether that's just because we might not understand it. Was Paul a good candidate for the gospel? Well, yeah, he was. Do what? He didn't seem to be from an outward appearance, right? But if we look at anyone who's a good candidate for the gospel is anyone who hasn't been saved, and then everyone's a good candidate, right? But you're right, from the outside appearance, the person that stood there while Stephen was being stoned and held the talks about holding the clothes of those that were stoning them. Not exactly. So in fact, he had such a reputation. Remember, after he was saved on the road to Damascus, when he got to the church there in Jerusalem, they turned him away and took Barnabas to come and talk to them because they were worried about him. Yes.
That to me is like an example of this. Does not know how.
Yeah. Yeah, because even it even mentions over in Acts, it talks about when Paul got there and he started going to the synagogues to preach the gospel, and the people are saying, wait a minute, you're the same person that just a few days ago was wanting to put these people to death. How in the world did this happen? And so we don't know other than the power of the gospel. Romans 1:16 and talks about that much in the same way that as it references here. The soil produces crops by itself, first the blade, then the head, then mature grain in the head. But the farmer plants, and then he goes to bed at night and he gets up, and day by day it slowly grows. But have you ever seen corn grow? I mean, actually, grow. It's kind of a day by day process, or week by week, or whatever it is. You just kind of sit there and stare at it. It's not doing anything. But you pass by, day by day, and eventually it grows up. All right. So now we'll actually get into the verses. All right. Was there any comments or hands I missed or anything? All right. All right. We'll start with verse 30. Now we're talking about another parable, the parable of the mustard seed. Mark chapter 4 and verse 30. And he said, how shall we picture the kingdom of God, or by what parable shall we present it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the soil, though it is smaller than all the seeds that are upon the soil, yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes larger than all the garden plants and forms large branches, so that the birds of the air can nest under its shade. But with many such parables, he was speaking the word to them, so far as they were able to hear it. And he did not speak to them without a parable, but he was explaining everything privately to his own disciples. So, all right. So the first couple of verses here. What's the purpose in talking about the mustard seed? Over here, get caught up in my notes. First of all, as far as the illustration on the mustard seed, yes. Right. It's here he references as the smallest, right? As the smallest seed, right? And it starts out small, but then what happens? It grows to be the biggest tree, right? And so, what's the spiritual application, the spiritual illustration, I guess? And just a little bit of planting faith. We've been here 2 years here at River Ridge, and I don't know how many we used to have over. Well, when we first started coming here, we were over in the school, in the library, and I don't know what the attendance was on Wednesday nights, 18 to 20, something along those lines. Sometimes on Sundays and everything. But now we look, here, and we're continuing to grow. Now, I understand that. I also want to say that I understand that numbers aren't everything. Where just because you're large in number doesn't necessarily mean that that pleases God. But we also understand that there's growth spiritually. By the time we grow spiritually, then many times that might be followed by growth numerically, because we're doing what we're supposed to do spiritually. Imagine the effect if all of us, Chuck talked about having 6 Bible studies this week. If every single one of us, except for David, but he has to send them in. If every single one of us had 6 Bible studies with someone, this week, imagine how much we would grow. As a congregation, at least how much how much the Lord's church would grow. If every single one of us had that many Bible studies set up, and and everything, we would see explosive growth, and especially if you take that out to maybe everyone here, everyone at Northwest, everyone at all the churches, having Bible studies set up, we would see a tremendous amount of growth. So, all right, any comments or anything? All right, so it grows up. Covered that in verse 31. Though it's smaller than all the seeds that are upon the soil, when it's sown, it grows up and becomes larger than all the garden plants. So, so it talks about the growth, and just after this, after Jesus' death and his resurrection, he's ascended into heaven, and there in the first part of Acts, remember in Acts chapter 2, remember it talks about when they took the gospel to those. Remember it talks about, remember how many people it said were added to the church in that one day? Yeah, about 3,000. Yeah, about 3,000. 3,000 souls. Starting out with what? Jesus coming. Well, it's John the Baptist preparing the way, but what Jesus coming? In the first part of Mark, coming by, the four fishermen, asking them to follow him. Look at maybe that at the starting place, versus that starting place and where they got to there in Acts chapter 2. With many such parables, he was speaking the word to them, so far as they were able to hear it, but he did not speak to them without a parable, but he was explaining everything privately to his own disciples. What do you take from these? You take anything from these last couple of verses here that maybe the multitude didn't understand, the people he was talking to didn't understand, or was this just more of explaining a little more in detail, maybe to the disciples that are a little bit closer? I'm not sure. When you're the teacher, you can ask questions like this. Do that. So the way I read it, I think people understood what he was talking about, or else, Jesus is the master teacher. There's no one better at doing the things he did as far as teaching those. But I think the way I take that is that the multitude understood, for the most part. But for his disciples, that he was explaining everything privately to them. Remember, they were the apostles anyway. He chose them to what? To go out and preach, right? So they were going to have some serious responsibilities and things like that. So the way I think it is that it wasn't that the multitude had no idea what he was talking about, but that they understood that he was explaining things a little bit better to them. I guess a little bit more in detail. So, all right. Before we get to the last part of the chapter here, verses 35 through 41, fairly common event that we read about here. Verse 35, on that day, when evening came, he said to them, let us go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? And they became very much afraid, and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? All right. So again, some things that we can maybe we can look at and learn from this episode. I'll go ahead and tell you this. A couple of years ago, teaching the high school class, and we read this, and I asked them. I said, so what can you learn from this? And one guy spoke up and said that Jesus was a heavy sleeper. And I said, okay, outside of that, all right, so maybe so, both pushing all which way and Jesus was asleep. Outside of that, all right, what spiritual things can we learn? And so that way I tried to put that out, and no one say that because you've been good smart aleck, but that's okay. Open myself up for it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You know, yeah. 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 It's one thing to say that we have faith in Jesus, or we have faith in God, and that we believe in God here, while we're amongst everyone. But then it's a whole different story if we're by ourselves out in the world and things, and we have to stand up for our faith. It's easy here, amongst everyone that's like-minded, wanting to do the right thing. But getting ourselves out, uh, in the world, then it could become different. Yes.
Have the storm come up, here's a trial.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are we going to do?
Yeah. 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 Wake them up and say, hey, don't you care that I'll say, they said, don't you care that we are parents? You don't know if they included him in that or not, but still, you're right. The point, point being, Dave, say your hand. Yeah, and it is, in this case, and Nikki makes a good point because it's, hindsight's 2020. It's always easy to look back and say, wow, why didn't they have more faith? They were with Jesus, and they were next to him, and he was explaining everything privately to them. We just read in the previous verses, but yet all of a sudden the storm comes up, and when their faith is completely yeah, absolutely, yeah, every time. Yeah, it's easy to point the finger and say, man, can you believe that they would do that? And but yet, we did the same. We did the same thing. It's easy to look at the children of Israel and be like, wow, they would follow God, and then they would stop, and they would fall into all sorts of, slavery, and the nation breaking down, and then they would follow God, and then it would happen again. Don't they ever learn? Well, does that ever happen to us? Yeah, don't we ever learn? So yeah, so it's easy to look back and say, you think about Peter there in the garden. Remember when they came to arrest Jesus, and he was with Jesus and all the disciples. And remember, he took out his sword and cut off Malchus' ear, right? And it's my belief, it's my belief that at that particular point, Peter was ready to die, for Jesus, and he wasn't scared at all. But who was he around? He was around Jesus. He was close to him. He was with, the other disciples. But then what happens? Not too much longer after that, Peter by himself, away from Jesus, denies him. Denies him 3 times. So, a good testament, or good thoughts on our faith. Is it what it should be? If we get in real deep to this, I don't know how bad the storm was. I mean, obviously it was bad enough that seasoned professional fishermen, that's what they were. When Jesus called them, thought they were going to die. You'd have to think they would be, that they would be experienced, or had seen rough seas before, rough storms, and so that's how bad it was. So you have to think that it was a rough storm. What does that have to do with anything? The only reason I bring that up is because when verse 39, I think is interesting. It says, talking about Jesus, and he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Hush, be still," and the wind died down, and and became perfectly calm. It gives the impression, to me anyway, where it talks about Jesus rebuked the wind. It doesn't give me the impression that he kind of walked out there and kind of waved his hand real lightly. He talks about he rebuked. Now, whatever he did, I don't know. But if you've ever seen, live and in person or on film, you ever seen rough seas? There, you've seen videos of big aircraft carriers being tossed all around. I don't know if it was that bad or not, but I know this, that what happened here, that Jesus' miracle was enough to scare them as much as they were scared for their lives of the storm. So that's pretty amazing when you think about the power that Jesus had. That the power of the storm, of them thinking they were going to lose their life, made them scared. But then Jesus' power of calming the storm, in verse 41, says they became very much afraid. He said, "Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So even Jesus' power, struck me that it wasn't one of those Jesus said this and said that to the storm, and then 45 minutes later the storm blew over and got quiet again. It says here in verse 39, it says the wind died down and became perfectly calm. And then you got to think, whenever a miracle happened, people understood it was a miracle. They didn't. It wasn't one of these. If my cut on my hand, and a faith healer says, does something, and then says, okay, in 4 or 5 days that cut will heal. That's not exactly what we're talking about. So when we talk about that, so it's interesting. Even the power of Jesus, was so powerful to them. It actually ended up scaring them so much or more than when they thought they were going to lose their life. So, all right. Any questions or comments or anything? All right, we've got about 10 minutes, roughly here. All right, let's go on into chapter 5, and we'll read the first couple of verses here, and I'll just read until right around verse 10. Then they came to the other side of the sea, in the country of Gerasene. Yes, I'm saying that right. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain. Because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. The chains had been torn apart by him, the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly night and day he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gashing himself with stones. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. Shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of God, Most High God? I implore you, by God, do not torment me." For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he began to implore him earnestly not to send him out of the country. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. The herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. All right, we'll stop there. I can go to verse 20. So all that happens on the boat. Jesus calms the storm. They get to the other side, and they come out of the boat, and then what happens? What did we just read? So you get off the boat, start walking up into the country here. I'm pronounce the name again, and then what happens? Yeah, he appears to have one of the more violent possessions that we've read about, right? Where it says, he was living there alone in the tombs, and it talks about no one was able to bind him anymore, even with chain. I don't know if that refers to he was so wild they couldn't even corral him, or if they did, if he broke the chain, whatever it was. Whatever it was, he was extremely demon possessed, more violent than we've read about before. And verse 4 there, I'm sorry, I didn't read that. I'm talking about being broken apart. part of the miracle part there talks about being possessed. Constantly night and day he was freed among the tombs. Now what's interesting when Jesus comes up to them or approaches, I guess. He sees them from far off, right? Or at least he gives that saying in verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance. What does it say? What does it say that he did?
He ran and worshiped.
Yeah, ran up and bowed down before him, and running up and bowing down shows what? It shows he knew who he was, yeah, because he even mentions that later. But it also shows that Jesus was the one in control here, right? And the demon knew it, And so he sees him from a distance. He runs up and bows down before him, and then they start shouting with a loud voice, begging him, what business do we have with each other? I implore you, my God, not to torment me, because it's interesting. He was worried about being tormented, and all Jesus was saying was what? I'm out of the man, you're an unclean spirit. We mentioned this before. There's people that say that all you have to do is believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that you'll be saved. And not only this example, but other examples as well. What does this show right here? Do what? Yeah, the demons believe, right? And feared him as well. So, and respected his power and authority. Yeah. Right. They even asked permission. They understood who he was. So they often make the point. If you think that belief is all it takes to be saved, then there's going to be some interesting people in heaven, right? So with the demons, even feeling that way. So he begs Jesus to leave him alone, not to torment him. The spirit of the demon inside him. So then he tells him his name. It appears that there's more than just one inside. Maybe that's where he gets his strength and kind of out of control behavior. Doesn't really matter. The name is Legion for where it means. And so where does Jesus end up sending them? Where does Jesus end up sending the demons? Into swine, and then where do they go? Off cliff, right? So sends them into the swine. They go off the cliff and down into the ocean. And this is one of those things Chuck talks about. Sometimes we so caught up in the details we don't understand exactly how things work. Overlook points here. I don't know what it was like to send demons into a herd of swine. I'm not sure. Did they all become possessed? Did they? I don't know. When they ran down, into the off cliff into the ocean, did that take away the demon's power to them not possessing anyone anymore? I don't know. It doesn't say. But let's not overlook the main points of this. One is that Jesus' power and his authority. So much so that legions of demons there in verse 9 not only knew who he was, but bowed before him and begged him to leave him alone. So they knew who Jesus was, but not only that, they knew his power and they knew his authority. This is not the first example of demon possession that we've come across in the book, but it's the first that was like this one with apparently a man being so out of control, being demon possessed. It happened in different instances, but in each instance, the demon knew who Jesus was and he knew his power. So something for us to remember there. Then, as we get into the last part here, in the last couple of minutes, it says the herdsman reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. It's interesting. This is how Jesus' fame grew to begin with, right? He would do the miracles. He would do the miracles, establishing his authority. The people would see it. They would go, they would spread the word of what happened, and then people came. That's why Jesus was teaching from the boat. Remember back as we ended chapter 4, Jesus was teaching them from the boat when he taught those things because the crowd was so great. And he told the disciples to have a boat ready for him so I can get out, so he wouldn't be so pressed upon or pressed against because of that. And so here, cross over from there to the other side, and now his fame is getting ready to spread again. You talk about his fame, not necessarily in a good way, because it has a positive effect on some people, but also has a negative. Who was we talked about before, but who was not happy at all with Jesus? Yeah, Pharisees, scribes, and Pharisees. Why? Yeah, he was rattling the cage of their the way that things were set up, with them being in authority, and the way that they thought that things were supposed to be with that. And so whenever Jesus shows up, he certainly speaks the truth, and he certainly gives signs of his authority, but not everyone is always receptive to it. And it's the same way today. When we talk to people, about the gospel, and we try and teach them, or whatever it may be, there'll be some people who are receptive, and there'll be some people who are completely turned off by it, and have a bad attitude, to say the least, but hostile toward it. As we unfortunately we're seeing more and more today. All right, we'll read the last 5 verses. Then they came to Jesus. Kind of the people came out from the sea. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Those who had seen it described to them how it happened to the demon possessed man, and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave their region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him go, but he said to him, "Go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. All right, so in the last 2 minutes, we see that the townspeople come out and they hear what's happened, and what's their reaction? Unbelief. You need to go away. It's what it is. That they were afraid, right? Whatever that was. In verse 17, when they began to implore him to leave the region. It says they became frightened there at the end of verse 15. I don't know why necessarily they become frightened, unless they were frightened of the power of Jesus. Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. They obviously knew what the man was like before, and they knew what he was like now. And yeah, I'm not going to. I have no idea what their thoughts were. It could have been that they thought, it took someone much stronger than the demons to handle the situation the way it was, and they could have, very easily thought that Jesus was greater than the demons, but not in a good way. So, all right, appreciate your patience for class. I think Martin Evans is supposed to teach next Wednesday.
I know.
Would take and mark your song books to page 722. You'll see that as a song of encouragement after my brief city question. For my family's invitations to turn to 157. 157. For the beauty of the earth, for the beauty of the sky, for the love which from earth, over and around us fly. Lord of all to thee we raise, this our sacrifice of praise. For the beauty of the hour, of the day and of the night, still and fair and free and light, sun and moon and stars of light. Lord of all, to thee we raise, this our sacrifice of praise. For the joy of human love, brother, sister, friends on earth and friends above, for all gentle Lord of all, to thee we raise, this our sacrifice of praise. For thy church that evermore live with holy and love, offering upon every shore pure sacrifice of love. Lord of all, to thee we pray, with our sacrifice of praise. Think about all the days that happen in our lives in the are. I saw a interesting little article about the different days, not necessarily national holidays, but they're celebrated. For instance, Friday is National Don't Step on the Booty Day. You can do that. Tomorrow is National Sugar Day. You can do that. In September, some of us celebrate this day more than once. It's Ask a Stupid Question Day. And so that can be like September 30th, not the week. So, but you know, a lot of different days there. And really, those days are somewhat inconsequential if you get that. Those are more important days. We talk about maybe our birthdays or maybe our spiritual birthday, something like that. Or wedding day or any anniversary or something like that. It's pretty important days that come along. All of us going to have a very important day. One day might be missed by anybody. First Thessalonians chapter 4. One of these few verses. These few verses here. Starting in verse 13. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep. So that you will not grieve as with the rest who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and you can show God and bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not see those who have fallen asleep. So the Lord himself will descend from heaven, with shout, with the voice of the archangel, and the trumpet of God, and then Christ will rise first. And we who are alive will remain and be caught up together with him in the clouds, with the Lord in the air, so we shall always be with the Lord. This talks about two ways that we're going to leave the earth. One's going to be a physical death, that may come about. This is the other way. More than two ways that we're going to leave this life. It's interesting. Verse 18, that it reads, it says, therefore, comfort one another with this word. A lot of times we talk about death, dying, separation from loved ones, it's worrisome and bothers people. And it's interesting here that Paul says, take those words I just said about the Lord coming back and everything being gone, and comfort one another with these words that, and go back over what he read, but there was something implied in that, is that you have to be in a right relationship with God. Because if not, then we turn over the last few verses and the rest of the other in Matthew chapter 25, and it's the theme of judgment day. And I won't read all of it there in verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, and he will sit on his glorious throne, all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will sheep on his right hand and goats from the left. And he will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed of my Father, and your kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world, and you go to that list. But then move down to verse 41. So then you also say to those who are taught from the first one into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil, and some other things there. They sing songs. There's a great day coming. And there is a great day coming, but it's interesting. In those verses, it goes into the bright day and the sad day. There's going to be some days that we talk about. If you go back to the Job, when Satan spoke to God, it talks about that in the day. There's going to come a day when we have some bad things happen to us. We already know that behind the scenes in spiritual life, Satan is plotting to do things to us to make us have faith, and we have no idea about those days. So we know if we stay faithful, and then the judgment day that we read about there in Matthew, when people were separated to right and left, so we can comfort one another with the word that either when we pass in this life physically or alive when Jesus comes back, and we can be on the right side and be up against heaven with that. But we also know that we have to be in the right relationship with God. We also know that we have to obey the gospel, and we also have to stay faithful to Him in order to do that. So tonight, we offer the invitation to those who might need it. If you respond to it, to obey the gospel, certainly we can do that. Or if you need our prayers for certain situations to make the life right, certainly we can do that. But whatever it may be, if you come forward by the standing and saying, we have heard the joyful sound, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, bread and wine all around, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Where the news to every land, find the sheep and rocks away. Onward is our Lord's command. Jesus save, Jesus save. Walking on the rolling tide, Jesus save, Jesus save. Tell the sinners far and wide, Jesus save, Jesus save. Sing the islands of the sea, echo back the ocean gray. Earth shall be forever free. Jesus save, Jesus save. In the wind, a mighty voice, Jesus save, Jesus save. Let the nations now rejoice. Jesus save, Jesus save. Shout salvation full and free, highest hills and deepest cave. This our song of victory. Jesus save, Jesus save.
I thank Mike for a good invitation this evening. Chuck, the announcer said.
Just other than the Nevins are still out of town, everybody else.
As far as the sickness goes, I'm not sure what the latest on that is. I know we went to move the Grand Bays in the prairie. And if there's anyone on this, then bring it to my attention. If there's nothing else, then we'll dismiss and closing prayer.
Father in heaven, as we come to you tonight, we want to thank you for this opportunity we've had to come in midweek to be edified, to be built up. We as your children need to be strengthened. We gain that by drawing closer to you and, of course, to each other. We're thankful for the family that meets in this place, the common love that we have for you, the common love we have for each other. And more than that, even the common love we have for the lost. We pray that you continue to bless us in our efforts to share the gospel with others as we plant and water. We're so encouraged by so many that are expressing an interest in wanting to learn your word. We pray earnestly for them. We pray, Father, for doors to continue to open and that we will have the courage to take advantage of that. Be with our members that are away from this night, with Michael and Evans, and of course, Tim and Trey. We pray that you look over them and keep them safe. And if there's others that we're not aware of that are not feeling well, you know all things, Father. We leave it with you. We just are comforted by knowing that you are an awesome God, a powerful God. And we're so grateful for you sending your Son and his willingness to come and die for us and provide that perfect example. May we live up to the name Christian. May we strive to be a church that you want us to be and be a shining light in this world of darkness. Please be with us as we depart here tonight. Help us to be mindful of what we just learned as far as staying faithful to the very end, keeping our eye on the mark. Please go with us now as our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. You're ready to go. Yeah.